My name is Serafina the Masked Lady. I was once human. Since then, I have lived many lives. I have been loved and reviled, adored and despised, been the child of a poor prostitute and a courtesan revered by thousands. When I was a child, a stranger with no face offered me the ability to move between the worlds. Since then, my every death has led to a new life. I once had a true love. He was ripped away from me when I was murdered in the 18th century. I search for him still. In the meantime, I walk in the shadows behind the universe, visiting realms both exquisite and terrible and bringing back stories and rhymes to amaze the mind and enchant the ear. Through my YouTube channel, I send the stories out into the world, hoping that my true love will hear them and reply. Hoping, if he does not, that I will find in the other souls who listen kindred spirits to help ease the pain. What of you, stranger? Did you come here tonight seeking a mystery? Do you hunger for a spark of excitement, for the dark thrill of fear? Will you listen as my tales unfold, knowing that some may very well take on lives of their own? Consider, stranger, whether you have the courage to walk between the worlds with Serafina the Masked Lady. Hello, my delicious darlings, and welcome back to the channel. I hope that you're having a wonderful week. I have been a little under the weather. Crazy, right? I can move between universes, and so far, none of my deaths have ever stuck, but I can still be left feeling awful by a flu bug. The universe is a confusing place. Luckily, while resting, I decided to troll through some old files and rediscovered this narrative poem. I initially found it in the Paris of another universe, in a library that does not exist on this earth. The poem contains both sadness and beauty, unfortunately. It also features mentions of attempted self-harm. If you are likely to be upset or triggered by the subject, then it might be worth skipping this episode and rejoining me next week. So, imagine that you are in Paris. It is night, and you are walking through the pools of lamplight beside the Seine. You think you're alone, but as you walk, deep in thought, you see a strange pale woman sitting on a bench. She looks up at you and smiles as though she recognizes you, and you see that her teeth are very white and very, very sharp. The Vampire of Rouen. I met the girl they call the Rouen vampire down by the lapping Seine one foggy night. The blanket of sighs fallen down from heaven was so heavy I could not see the light of the mullioned lamps that marched, rank on rank, along the walkway where I sat alone. My head bent low, and my heart drooping lower, the organ in my chest a heavy stone. I'd sat there every night for a full 6 months since my wife had died birthing our baby. A girl as sweet and lovely as her mother, who died so she would never be lonely. My wife and child had left me well provided. I did not need to fear for food or home. I could afford the finest cloth ever stitched, but nothing mattered now I was alone. The first time that I'd stood beside the river, I trembled on the edge of the walkway, looking down at the rolling, greasy water flowing down towards the far distant bay, where it emptied out into the silver ocean. I'd wondered if I should step or jump down, if the river closing over my head would bring me peace by taking me to my own, or if I'd be forever barred from heaven, a lonely ghost drifting on through the night, while time and man and earth went through the motions, circling till they faded out of sight. I might have jumped, too, had I not remembered a fragment of an oft-told ghost story that said, if one destroyed themselves for love's sake, then ever after, they'd a vampire be. I didn't believe in the old myth, of course, any more than goblins hidden in rain, or any other foolishness of children. Still, the horror of rising once again, to be separated from love forever had such power to threaten and amaze. I'd rather slog on through a human lifetime of sleepless nights and drunken, heavy days than risk forfeiting my one chance of heaven to hurry the reunion. With a frown, I stepped back from the edge, and on an iron bench, chilled by the river winds, I sat me down. From then on, every evening, I returned there like a clock hand forever circling round. I don't know what I hoped to find except that my anguish came closest to being drowned. Whenever I could hear the river lapping against the stone walls just beneath my feet, I sat there through the long, hot nights of summer and winter nights where stars sparkled with sleet. I watched both doves and gulls bob on the water. Sometimes, the odd fish leapt up towards me, arcing through the air, shining in the moonlight, before splashing back downward merrily. So I was there on that cold December night, wondering if the world had been wiped away. Then through the murk, I heard the sound of light feminine feet tapping along the way. I waited as they moved across the smooth stones. "Can I sit down?" I heard a gentle voice ask me. "I don't like this fog. It unnerves me on chilly nights." "Of course, it is your choice." I looked, I squinted, but I could not see her until there was a parting of the gloom, as when the dancers part before a beauty whose entrance sends a shiver through the room. And there she was, a girl, tiny and slender, dressed head to toe in layers of shifting black. Her face was slim, and her youthful chin pointed. Her other features were harder to track, but in the end, I saw two amethyst eyes and a droll, ribbon mouth drawn like a bow. There was not one hint of blush in her high cheeks. Her skin was pale, paler than fallen snow. Oddly, that did not seem to me a horror. She did not look like someone newly dead, but a will-o'-wisp sister to the mist wraiths that twined, twisted, and circled round my head. Her body slim enough to be a child's but her expression seemed to speak of age, endless and heavy, achieved by much trial. I wished that I could read it like a page, because it appeared that sorrow and wonder, joy, hope and fear could be discovered there. For the first time since I'd buried my darlings, I thought I'd found something precious and rare. I bade the little lady sit. I told her my name, my age, what had happened to me, to make me not sleep one whole night in 6 months. I said I'd thought of moving to the sea. I asked her why she walked the night all alone. Did she not fear what others might be there? Monsters, I told her, roamed here after twilight, and not all were the kind with fangs and hair. The little lady laughed. She wasn't concerned. She slipped onto the bench to sit by me. She told me she was sorry for my trouble, that my wife and baby had so left me. She, too, had known a loss not quite as dreadful. I lost a pair while the girl only one, but bad enough that she, too, sought the twilight and disdained the radiance of the sun. She gave no more detail, but I believed her. There was about her a melancholy, not dragging as mine was, but something softer, as if sadness could be a melody. We accepted each other as companions, and our conversations just drifted on. Throughout the dark hours until just before dawn, I heard a sigh, and the lady was gone. I was nervous the following night as I waited, wondering if she would return. I told myself, at first, it was just interest, but soon my mind and soul began to burn. I admitted I wanted to speak with her and see what other mysteries she knew, what jewels and joys she'd encountered in the dark. To ask if she was ever lonely too. Her small, soft steps came back at around midnight. I heard her approach and felt the first joy that I had felt since I saw my darling wife when she was a girl, I a foolish boy. She came and sat by me, asked about my health, and told me she had been thinking of me. She'd wondered if I'd be here again tonight or if I'd retired to bed finally. She told me that she had been confused last night. She'd even forgotten to tell her name. She asked that I forgive her for her rudeness and not hold forgetfulness to her blame. She took my hand and said she was Mavella. She'd been born in Paris, a simple girl, and moved to Rouen when she was just 16. She'd traveled, but France still was her whole world. Her home these days was not far from the river. In fact, she confessed that she had seen me before last night. We had both swum through the thick fog that had enclosed us closely. She told me that she couldn't stand busy streets but worked from sundown till nearly midnight. I confess I thought she sold tender favors, my petite, dark-haired lady of the night. I didn't care. Her lightning wit made me grin for the first time in what seemed like an age. I felt some guilt but also massive relief. That night, I turned over a single page. in my life. From then on, I waited for her gentle voice to hail me every night. Sometimes, she could not come but would hurry back inside a day to see I was all right. She'd bring me treats from her journeys. Small candies, sugared fruit, and a book on Gascony. Nothing expensive, but all calculated to bring a flare of wonder back to me. Thus, a year passed when I grew thin and older, but my Mavila didn't change one whit. On the night that marked 18 months from my loss, Mavila came. I thought she'd had a fit, or been caught up in some kind of accident. She seemed wild and strange, whirling dizzily. She sat so heavily that she almost fell, then whispered she needed something from me. When I asked what, she said, "I have hurt my leg. I couldn't hunt, nearly slipped in the flood. On my way here, dear heaven, what do you need? I need you to gift me some of your blood." "What do you mean, my blood?" I asked, fear slipping along my spine and deep into my veins. I felt like a weight was bearing me down now, like my limbs had been bound up in thick chains. Mavila smiled again. "I thought that you knew. After all, you have been a friend to me. You noticed I seemed thin, pale, weak and dizzy and only came to your side once nightly. I wondered, I confessed, but I suppose I decided to push the thought far away. It made me feel at peace to sit beside you and hear you speak of countries far away. But now I must ask what you are speaking of. What do you mean that you need blood from me? What does that have to do with food and hunger? I'll help if you feel needs so desperately. But please explain, dear boy. I am a phantom. Were you born in England? Then you would say, I am a vampire, a drinker of blood. I haunt the dark, cannot endure the day, and hunt in the early parts of the black night. That's why it's late each time I come to you. I hoped I'd never have to ask you for this, but I'm in pain and have almost turned blue. And now the question." The poor child was shaking. "Will you share a part of your blood with me? I won't take much. Sure, not enough to hurt you, but right now, hunger's making me so weak that I could not hope to defend my own life if others of my kind did find me here. What answer could I give to she who'd helped me to endure nights for an entire year?" I opened my arms, and I pulled her to me. Her fangs into my waiting throat bit deep. There was no pain, at least no more than if a spider had bitten me in my deep sleep. She kept her word and only drank a little. When she pulled back, both her eyes were alight. A pair of roses were blooming on her cheeks. She grabbed hold of my hand and held it tight. "Thank you so much," she whispered. "I am strong now. You're welcome." I paused. "Would you do for me an answering kindness?" "Sure, ask anything. I would like to know how you came to be the thing that you are." It was by my own hand, my heart that mourned with immoderate grief, when my twin brother, the second part of my soul, proved by his dying that time was a thief. Were you attacked or bitten by a creature? No. Other people may have been changed so, but not me. I went to my brother's gravesite, and I laid down upon it in the snow. Our parents had already left us, you see. I waited for death to end all my pain. Numbness and darkness held me for a short spell, but soon enough, I was awake again. "And you were changed?" She nodded. "As you see me, I was more robust in many odd ways, but the last of the waning sunlight burned me, almost broiling my skin with its weak rays. It took me time to understand what I was, and what sort of hunger was driving me. I would not have lasted long all on my own, had not one very much older found me. But now there's something that I can do for you." "No, really, you need do nothing for me." "Wait now, you will want the gift I offer you." She asked about my wife and my baby. I had only revealed the basics before, how I had lost and missed them with each breath, and how it ached that I would see them no more until God granted me merciful death. Now, Mavila wanted to know the details. Where had they died? Had they been laid in earth? "I know a way to reunite your family, to give your dearest dreams a second birth." "That can't be. They've been dead for 18 long months. Their souls to high heaven have flown away. Their eyes now look on colors more resplendent than any in this dark, cold world of gray. Perhaps if my wife was still caught in labor and agreed that it was the thing to do, you might have saved her and my baby daughter. Now, they are far beyond both me and you. Me and you, yes, Mavilla said. But I have spoken to one more powerful than me. He has walked the world for uncounted centuries. If I convince him your ally to be, it will not matter if your loved ones have lain in the chill of the earth 100 years. They'll wake at his call and sally forth to fright any who begrudge them their newborn years. Is he a vampire too? Yes, but so ancient some say he witnessed the dawn of the earth. He was the one who saved me when I nearly starved after waking on the snowy earth. If he aids you, then you will owe him tribute just like he takes part of my haul from me. But surely it would be worth obedience to live life again with your family. Of course, he'll bring you across the veil as well, else your loves would be a danger to you. Still, you will have what you have always wanted. Companions to live your life with you. I thought. I could not help it. My poor mind whirled. I frowned, but I was nodding my head all along, imagining the smile on my fair wife's face and how I'd feel to see her sing a song to our darling daughter while she was nursing. I'd give my life, my soul and anything to see that sight. I'd even pay tribute to Mavilla and her strange, shadowy king. So it was agreed. Next night, to the churchyard, I went with young Mavilla, held hand in hand. It was the same churchyard where my loved ones lay. We met the second vampire by a stand of weeping willows against the far fence line. He stood near as tall as the tallest tree, dressed all in black and glaring with blood-red eyes. When I saw him, a shiver ran through me. He didn't speak but bowed his head in greeting. His eyes narrowed. Mavilla looked at me. She said, "You won't like what I have to tell you. We have to uncover their poor bodies." My wife and daughter, you mean? My friend nodded. If we're to raise them, they must touch the night. I am happy to do the digging for you, but you must tell me it is all right. I'd like to meet him first. I pointed at the strange creature loitering beside the trees. Mavilla looked uncertain. For a moment, everything froze, even the night breeze. But then the figure came forward, bowed again, and said, "Bonjour. My name is Jean Louis. Mavilla tells me you helped her. In return, I'm willing to raise your wife and baby. The process is long and hard, too, however. It will require all of my energy. Mavilla is willing to do the hard work while I must weave a spell. Don't talk to me again, unless it is to bid me farewell and surrender the gift that I offer. If you do so, then bring Mavilla with you, for I will no longer set eyes on her." Did I walk away? No, although I should have. I admit it. I was a desperate fool. I didn't know just how far gone I was then, on the verge of breaking each golden rule in the good book. Instead, I nodded and told Mavilla to do whatever she had to. I would not now wrest her free of all help as long as what the stranger said was true. She gave a half nod and then hurried forward to the tomb where my wife and baby lay. I admit that I kept my eyes on my shoes until she whispered, "All their mortal clay lies wrapped in satin right beside the bonfire." I hadn't even heard her light the blaze, or smelled the kindling as flames licked the branches. I'd never been in such a profound daze. I followed Mavilla towards the bonfire. Her towering master was already there. He doffed his clothes and was standing, arms upraised like someone in an attitude of prayer. I barely noticed, though, for seeing his face had knocked all semblance of courage from me. Perhaps I should have expected his visage. After all, hadn't Mavilla warned me that he had lived through endless years of nighttime? Still, his face contained no humanity. There were no features but a vast, tooth-filled mouth and two blood-red eyes that stared down at me. Apart from that, his face, neck and his shoulders were slicks of paper white and dimpled flesh, covered in dark, demonic-looking sigils, some pale and some that bled as though carved fresh. His chest was thin but muscled, and beneath it was a slim form that seemed to hold coiled power, as a king cobra coiled and ready to strike or a circling hawk prepared to devour. There, too, the ancient rune form cuts continued, except on the place where a mortal heart had beaten strong. In that place was a long scar as if his ribcage had been spread apart, and the organ removed. From his waist downwards was a sheer skirt of old Egyptian style. Another man in such attire might have caused people around them to snicker and smile. Not so the creature glowing in the firelight. He was a hellish horror. What of me? Did I run, then? I wish I could say I did, but I wanted to greet my family, alive and breathing. So I swallowed my fear as the creature raised up a droning chant. I moved to stand beside the silken bundle of my love's bones. Mavella hissed, "You can't. You probably shouldn't look at them until they've returned to us completely. The spell takes time. Their bodies reconstitute. I've seen it, and it can be unsightly." I went with her. Something had happened to me, or else I'd not have let myself be led. I should have asked questions, demanded answers, and not simply agreed and bowed my head. I knew that, but the knowledge came far too late. By then, the chant was echoing on high. I heard movement on the fire's far right side, a moan that lifted to a keening cry. I knew, then, that the hellish call must have worked and called to life my dearest family. Malvella's hand stretched out and fell on my arm. I knew that she wanted to restrain me, but I pulled away and circled the fire. When I saw what stood there, I almost fell. I'd hoped to perceive a holy miracle. Instead, I glimpsed a vision out of hell. My wife stood there, an infant clutched in her arms. I recognized her fall of flaxen hair, and the way her head tilted just to the side, but looking on was more than I could bear. They were not returned as they'd been, full of life, their bodies and souls bright, alight and gay. Instead, they looked like the creature that called them, their eyes like pits, their skin a rotten gray. When I cried out, they turned to me, and they hissed, their fangs carved and sharp like a weaving snake. The thing, once my wife, smiled and licked her lips. Mavella whispered, "There's been a mistake." I hadn't noticed her footsteps approaching. Mavella said, "Push them into the fire. Jean-Louis wants them to be his new lackeys and you to be his child hunter for hire." His what? Jean-Louis was made out of violence. When young, a demon possessed his body. Since then, he's done every foul thing he can. I told the truth that he once succored me, but since then, he has used me as a lure for other lonely wanderers of the night. I bring them to him, and sometimes he eats them, draining body and soul of life and light. And sometimes he raises departed loved ones to enslave honorable, upright men, to cross through salt and wooden crosses for him, stealing the poor children of mortal men. Those creatures there are not your wife and daughter. They're hollow monsters of iniquity. They exist only to hunt and to kill men. What you do now determines family. If you remain, these monsters will be the ones with whom you spend your empty, endless life. Force them through the fire, and you and I will die, but you will have a chance to know the light. Where your loved ones live now, my soul was screaming. I could barely stand to look around me, but instinct took over, and I shoved forward the monstrous relics of my family. The next moments were lost in blood and terror. I tried to run from the sound of their screams, and from Jean-Louis, I stumbled for the gate of the churchyard. Long claws cut me to reams, but I did not feel the pain. I kept forward until I felt teeth fastening into me, drawing my blood. I dropped onto the cold earth, feeling an awful weight pressed down on me. I could still hear the screaming of my family and dear Mavella sobbing desperately. Still, I could not feel sorrow or compassion, for all the life was being drawn from me. By Jean-Louis, I smelled the scent of brimstone. The pain grew worse and worse as seconds passed. I felt I deserved all the horror coming. I welcomed darkness when it came at last. When I opened my eyes, braced for perdition, I instead discovered a sunny day. I was lying face down outside the graveyard. A warm wind caressed the place where I lay. When I stood, there was no sign of Mavella, of the monsters or the foul Jean-Louis. If not for the blackened earth where the fire had been, I'd have thought I'd dreamed it up entirely. I looked for the remains of my wife and child, but their tomb now yawned open and empty. I knew that, even if they both had survived, Mavella and the awful Jean-Louis would only appear once darkness had come down. So I waited at home for night to come. At dusk, I wandered to my accustomed bench and sat there, just as I had always done. At 1 minute past midnight, a lovely voice spoke from the shadowed space just behind me. "They're gone," Mavella said. "You mean those monsters?" "Yes," the girl said, "and also Jean-Louis. I thought that I would die when I warned you that Jean-Louis was a demon with a plan. But he tried to pull the things from the campfire and in the conflagration could not stand. He died. He burned. I don't think demons can die, but his physical part leached all away. Whether the demon is in hell or the air, he no longer has power on earth to play. As for me, I've now decided to move on. Other night creatures want to bring me down. But first, I wanted to tell you I'm sorry and beg you not to be the one who drowns in the dark Seine. You have done nothing wrong. You only wanted back your dear family. Forgive yourself, and if anger still remains, I beg you put all of the blame on me." I turned towards her, but Mavella was gone, leaving behind fireflies and black night. I looked for her but never found her again. A month later, on a long, lonely night, I finally did step into the river and let the brown water close over me. I wanted to leave the world and let the foul, fast-flowing water dissolve all of me, but I was denied. For almost an hour, I sat in the silt on the riverbed. Then, despairing, I climbed back up the stone steps, trying to think why I was not yet dead. As it turns out, the last act before the death of the demonic vampire Jean-Louis was to spit into the cuts on my shoulder, and thus, he made a vampire of me. But I am like no other living creature, not made by grieving or by suicide. Not risen from death, possessed by a demon, or broken from a grave once I had died. It seems, from what I can tell, I'm immortal. Neither moonlight nor sunlight can burn me. I do not need to breathe. I have lost count of the times I've walked a river or a sea along its bed. I do not hunger for blood, nor can I stomach any human food. I thought I was lonely before Mavella. Now loneliness is ingrained in my blood. I do not know if I'm damned or forgiven, if this is prison or if I am free. Occasionally, I see other vampires, but all retreat and hurry clear of me. I am convinced I'm the loneliest vampire to ever walk the rough roads of the world. Sometimes, I still hear rumors of Mavella, but now most folks call her the Weeping Girl, or sometimes the young vampire of Rouen. Students seek her out, sleeping through their days, to read love poems to her on the benches and hear her tell them stories that amaze. They gladly part with sips of blood. She's careful never to kill or make others like her. She's conscientious, recalling my warnings of the monsters that don't bear fangs or fur. As for myself, I always travel around. I can fly, jump, or swim from shore to shore. Sometimes, I make friends with other night dwellers, my aching heart and spirits to restore. Whether my life is punishment or a trial, I'm resigned to bear it until the world, or my body breaks down, and then in heaven, I will finally see my wife and girl. So, there we have it. What did you think of the Vampire of Rouen? Have you noticed, as I have, that stories concerning sharp-toothed beings that feed on energy and blood occur in multiple universes? Even stranger, that the descriptions of them are nearly identical. I will not tell you what conclusions, if any, to take from that. I only mark it as possibly significant. Have you ever met a creature like the one in this story? Have you ever been out at night and noticed someone pale and furtive watching you? If you have, I would love to hear about it. If you give me permission, I might add the story to my files. Well, I am off to retire to bed with a fluffy jumper and a large box of tissues, and hope that my unique body quickly returns to normal. As always, if you would like to talk to me, share a scary story, ask me a question, or even tell me a joke, drop me a note in the comments below, and I will try to get back to you. Thank you for spending this evening with me.